Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift podcast. And Happy New Year's to everybody who just finished celebrating. We are going to kick off the new year with something that is so critical and so important for so many women going through divorce. And that is getting your money affairs in order, specifically when it comes to retirement, Social Security, and Medicare. And I have an expert here, Marcia Mantell. She is the founder and owner of Mantell Retirement Consulting, which is celebrating 21 years in business. And I think that that's just fantastic. Marcia is a blogger, a podcaster, a media columnist. I got to read all this list because there's a whole bunch of stuff, and an author who really has focused her life, her professional career on helping women manage these particular issues in the divorce process or in life processes. So Marcia, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marty. I am thrilled to be here, and I'm super excited that we're covering Social Security and Medicare. It's so important for us women.
Well, and I think, financial issues are the reason why a lot of women stay in very unhealthy relationships, whether it's unhealthy because it's in some way abusive, or they stay in a relationship that's just unsatisfying, that they don't really want to be in, but they don't really feel comfortable about moving out because of the concern about the money. So let's talk about this. But before we get into it, Marcia, tell us a little bit about why this is your area of focus, because not many women are in this specific area.
Well, no, they're not, Marty. And I'll tell you, I wish I had some grand, exquisite story to share with you and the listeners. But the fact of the matter is, I fell into it. I was looking for a job back when we just had to go find jobs, right? In the early 1990s, I had just had my first baby and I needed a new job. I landed at Fidelity Investments in the retirement side of that business. And I spent 13 years there, had a second baby, and then all of a sudden my baby was going to high school. And I needed more flexibility in an era when women in corporate America had no flexibility. So I up and quit, and I started my retirement consulting business now almost 21 years ago. And it turns out that there were some really big gaping holes in the knowledge around how do you retire. So the financial industry had focused on helping all of us accumulate enough money so we could retire of our own assets, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs. But they were just getting into how do you decumulate, and no one was in the Social Security space back in the early 2000s. It was you just assumed you signed up at 65 and went on your merry way.
Right.
Not so. So I ended up finding my way into this area of expertise. And once you move into the Social Security space, you got to know Medicare because the two programs are very closely aligned.
Right.
So that's been my journey. I couldn't have said this at age 18.
So, I gotta tell you, very few women I talk to that go into any of the work that we now do. This is our goal we had as a job when we were like little kids, 5, 6, 7.
Right. And your ballerina to your ice skates and Social Security. I mean, of course they go together.
And that's what I always say. Yeah, I never, mine was be a police officer or be a vet. It was not be a divorce coach.
Yes. And look at where we are.
And I think that even though you said that's not a great story, I think it is a great story because it's a story about a woman who needed to create a positive environment for herself and her kids and her family. And it wasn't staying in that corporate job. And I'm hearing this more and more. And I know that's not what we're talking about, in this podcast, but I do think it's important to recognize that women have a capacity to do amazing things, but don't very often give themselves credit for. And I think that kind of leads into this whole planning for retirement thing.
I completely agree. And partly it's because there's no education for this. There's no training. And that includes all the people, men and women, who are finance majors at elite universities. They come out of, their schooling and they've got a fancy degree and such, but they have none of this knowledge. It's not anything that's taught.
Right.
And I think we also ask the wrong questions. When you get to your 30s and 40s, let's say, and you're feeling uncomfortable because you don't know much about money, it tends to be a judgmental thing. Well, why don't you know about that? Well, why don't you know how to, pick a stock or invest in mutual funds? That's not the question to answer and ask. The question that needs to be asked is, why would we have known any of that?
Yeah.
And there is no pathway unless for some reason you either, like me, landed in a job where you had to learn the stuff, or you had some outside interest that was financially motivating.
Right.
But we have no infrastructure or framework in the US for financial literacy. So it isn't really us.
Yeah, it really isn't. And I just want to throw this in here. As everybody that listens to the podcast knows, I'm a Canadian, but now living in the States. It's basically the same in Canada. I mean, there's not a lot of difference. And I think it's the same in most countries. I don't think there is a real understanding. I just think the way that it's handled is a little bit different. So one of the things I know that we want to talk about is this whole idea of how do I know? Like, I know you get a statement every year from Social Security, and now you can view it online and it gives you all these projections and what's going to happen. But there's got to be, I mean, how do they get those numbers? There's some kind of a calculation that goes on there, right? So, can you kind of give us a sort of a 30,000-foot view of what that looks like?
Yeah, no calculus here. These are the
Okay,
basics.
good.
So, yeah, because there is a formula, and brilliant actuaries have put together the Social Security information and how it all works. But at a high level, there are three big numbers you need to know. The first is, do you have 40 credits? So have you worked for 40 quarters and paid taxes, payroll taxes, or FICA taxes into Social Security? Once you get to 40 quarters or 40 credits, you are now eligible for your own Social Security benefit based on your own work history.
Okay.
The second number is 35. When the actuaries and the brilliant minds who create our insurance payment benefit amounts do the math, they look at our highest 35 years of earnings. So this is a long view of our work history, including 1979 was my first year, Marty. Worked at McDonald's one summer, $125.
There you
So
go.
it goes all the way back to, where you are currently. There's an indexing for inflation, but the highest 35 years of earnings are what will be used to calculate your personal benefit. And the third number is you need to know your full retirement age, which sounds sort of funny. It's like, well, what is that? Isn't it 65, which is what most people think? And no, it is not 65. That's long gone. That went away in 1983. So it's somewhere between 66 and 67, depending on the year you're born. So for most people probably listening today, they're born in 1960 or later. 67 is your full retirement age.
Okay.
So once you are qualify or have paid enough taxes into the system, you're going to get a benefit, but it's based on your work history. So then you have to think about, yeah, but what if I don't have 35 years because I was an at-home mom? Now what? And that's where the fairness that is part of the Social Security law really comes into play.
And that it just so does that kind of give you some kind of credit for those years, or how does that work?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked it that way. No, you don't get any credit for that. And this is for all women in particular. Some men, especially some of the millennial men who are staying home to be dads now. This really impacts women and divorced women. So let's say you worked for 5 or 6 years before you got married and had kids. Then you had the kids and you stayed home for 25 years. Then maybe you went back to work for a handful of years. And let's even say you earned your 40 credits. That's typically 10 years of working. But you don't have 35 years with dollars in them. You
Right.
don't get credit for staying home and raising a good batch of kids. You end up with zeros in your formula. So that explains why women's Social Security benefits on average are lower than men's, usually by about $3,000 or $4,000 a year. So it's real money that we're shorted. But on the other hand, we did stay home to raise the kids and we didn't have covered earnings. We weren't paying FICA taxes.
Right.
But what's important to know, and especially for divorced women, you still may get a bigger benefit than you see on your statement. And it's based on those years you were married, and you can claim sometimes, not always, there's some rules we'll talk about, but you can claim on your ex-spouse's benefit amount, his work history, so that you get a little bit of a boost
Right.
in your Social Security income. And I think that's probably the most surprising thing for divorced people to know about. And it is highly under or misunderstood because you look at your statement and let's say your benefit amount is $1,200 a year. You're thinking, okay, I got to figure out how to get by on $1,200 or that plus my savings.
Right.
You may have some headroom here. We call it a spousal top up or an ex-spousal top up. And this is where you are eligible for some additional dollars based on that ex's bigger, we're going to assume bigger work history.
Right. Right.
But there's some hurdles you have to jump over. So not every divorced woman is eligible for this. You had to have been married for 10 consecutive years or longer. That's the big hurdle. If you were only married for 8 years or 7 years, okay, fine. Then you probably built a career and you've got, your sufficient Social Security income. But if you were married for a long time, and I know we've talked about gray divorce,
Right.
it's very common these days. And if you had that, you've got 25, 30 years of marriage, well, there's a calculation that needs to be done to see if you'll get a boost. So you meet the 10-year rule. You each have to be 62. You have to each be eligible even to be in the Social Security program.
Right. Right.
You have to be the lower earner. And importantly, you have not remarried.
Yes. Right.
That's the big, you still have to be on your own. We don't care what your ex-husband's done. It doesn't matter. This is about you.
Right.
And if you meet those requirements and you have a low amount of Social Security benefit because you stayed home, you'll get a top up. It might be $100 a month. It might be $500 a month. So it's something that you absolutely must explore.
Right. And I think one thing that I've heard, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, so please correct me if I'm wrong. If you apply for that, you have to make less than 50% than your spouse does. But it is important to understand that if you apply for that, it doesn't take out of what your spouse gets. It's an additional fund. So if you apply for it, his Social Security isn't going to drop by the corresponding amount that yours increases by. Because I've had some people who say like, well, I know my spouse is barely getting by on this. I don't, and we're getting along pretty good right now. I don't want to rock the boat and feeling that they're going to be taking out of his wallet. That's right. Not the way it works, right, Marcia? Is that correct?
That is exactly correct. And I usually hear it from the other side, which, not to throw the men under the bus, but just for a minute, they're the big earners and maybe they're getting $4,000 a month and he's remarried.
Right.
And he's saying, oh my gosh, if my ex claims on me now, I'm going to get less of a benefit. Not so. This is the fairness part of Social Security's law. The math is already done. There's already an assumption that some of us get divorced. There's already assumption that some of us will be dependent at-home moms and be dependent on our higher earner outside work husbands.
Right.
That's already been baked in.
Yeah.
So no one loses here. You don't lose as the higher earner. If your benefit's $4,000 a month and you claim at your full retirement age, you get your $4,000 a month. Your current wife also gets a spousal top up or a spousal benefit. And your ex-wife over here is still entitled to an ex-spousal benefit.
Yeah.
So there's really no one loses here.
Right.
And that's really important. And it's very kind. And this is such a typical women perspective, isn't it? Like, he's not doing that well. I don't want to,
that's not all my clients.
Exactly. Right. It's like, ladies, it's good to have a kind heart,
right?
not
Yeah.
to your detriment.
Yeah.
Because the laws are written, really, they were written to protect the women back in the 1930s.
Yeah. Yes.
So
To keep them
let's
off the
make sure.
public, to keep them off
Yes,
from being dependent on other
that's
public support. Yeah, I was
that's right.
fascinated. I found out, I talked to an attorney who shared how, alimony and child support all got started was basically because they didn't want a bunch of divorced women running around living on the streets because they had no
Okay.
income. Isn't that horrible? I mean, I'm
You know,
jokingly saying it, but it's horrible. Yeah.
but that's what finally pushed Social Security. It pushed Congress to finally do something back in the
Right.
19 mid 30s after the Great Depression, because we had all of the old people
Right.
literally on the streets and waiting in soup kitchen lines.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Terrible.
we can't be an intelligent, brilliant top nation. And this is how we treat our most vulnerable.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, sometimes it takes a pretty dramatic economic situation to get Congress to move on something.
But when they do, hopefully they get it kind of right. Now, I'm going to ask you this, and we may have to come back and do another whole one on Medicare because I have a feeling we're going to get kind of stuck on Social Security here because it's such an important thing.
So big, yeah.
What about the concerns? And I may be putting you on the spot here, Marcia, but I just read a blog that you did about 2033 and the concerns about where Social Security is going to be. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I do hear people that have concerns about that one.
And it's almost everyone at this point, like anyone who's 60 and older, who's kind of on the cusp of being able to claim, they're panicked. The oldest people are panicked, thinking their benefits are going to be cut in 2033. And then our young people have kind of thrown Social Security out with the bathwater and said, yeah, I'm not getting it anyway, so I don't care. Wrong, wrong, and wrong. So the situation is Social Security can only be funded by three lines of cash. Our payroll taxes covers about 90% of the incoming dollars. Taxation on Social Security benefits for the wealthier folks, and interest on the reserve account. Oh, what is the reserve account, you might ask? That's like the savings account. Right. There's a checking account part of the Social Security Trust Fund, and there's a savings account. And that savings account has all the surplus money from all the prior years, knowing that the baby boomer generation was coming and payroll taxes might not cover 100% of benefits. So the trustees, the actuaries, put out an annual report. And for the last 25 years, they've been letting Congress know that, hey, knock, knock, we're going to be running out of the reserve account in 2033. And therefore, not 100% of benefits can be paid, because the only amount that can be paid out is the corresponding amount paid in.
Sure.
So everyone is very concerned at this point. Right now we're in sort of an interesting political environment where Congress is otherwise occupied.
Yes.
Let's say that.
Yes.
And so they're not focused on, 2033, my gosh, it's 7 years, out. We got a million years to deal with this.
Right.
Which is what Congress did in 1982 when the savings account went dry. It was the same thing. Then all of a sudden in 1983, they passed huge amendments. I think the same thing will happen. So we have to be really smart and sort of really patient with Congress and say, they're going to fix it, but it's not going to be timely. And we're going to run right to the very end, to the bitter last dollar going out of that reserve account before they make a change.
Okay. And I, again, not being, not even being in the States at that point in time, it is interesting to know that this is not a unique situation. This has happened before. And right. The world did not stop revolving. Things got resolved and people did not end up literally having to be out on the street, which is obviously nobody wants that to happen.
And no one had a shortfall in their payment and no payments were missed.
Okay. Oh, that's even better to know. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really important that today's future retirees know that.
Right.
No one missed a dollar. No one was shorted a dollar. But it's going to take a lot of pressure from us older folks. We got to be calling our Congress people.
Right.
Put it on the first day of the month, every month. You just call your congressperson and let them know you're not happy, that they're not doing anything to shore up Social Security.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Marcia, while you were talking, something came to me and I'm going to ask this question. So I'm going to circle back to when we were talking about the 35 years and the income.
Years.
If you receive child support and alimony, say for 10 or 15 years, does that count as income in there, or that's an excluded income?
It is, because you're not paying FICA taxes on it. You
Right.
always want to think about what goes on, and you'll see it on your statement. I mean,
Right.
you can be working, say, it's even part-time. You can work at, the drugstore, you can work at the grocery store, or at a part-time job. So long as you're under a covered employer, they're the ones, the employer actually has to pay our FICA taxes. So it's a pretty clean line. But military military years, if you were in the service
Right.
and working for the military, they pay FICA. So those years count and that income counts. But unemployment also does not count because it's insurance.
Yeah. Right.
So you'll see it on your statement and the earnings history, and that will be much clearer for each individual to see what their benefits are going to be based on.
Yeah. This is such a fantastic topic. And we're definitely going to have you come back and talk about the whole Medicare. We're going to have to do a whole section on Medicare here really quickly. But is there anything, kind of the last minute wrap up of like golden nuggets of everything you shared? Is there something you feel that we haven't covered that divorced women should be aware of? Let's just stay specific to Social Security. Is there anything that you think that we've missed in the conversation that would be helpful for women to be able to think about, or men?
Right. Yeah, fair enough. There is one big piece. I love hearing when divorces are amicable, but many are not.
Right.
So when it comes time for you to file Social Security, either party, there's no permission that you ask. You don't call your ex and ask them, hey, is it okay if I claim on your benefit? Or you don't ask their permission. You don't tell them what you're doing. This is a completely confidential conversation between you and the Social Security agent. So you make an appointment with SSA through ssa.gov, and you make sure you have a frank conversation with them, but it is confidential, and they'll let you know if you're entitled to that spousal top-up.
And it's worth your while to get on the phone. Can you do it online now, or do you have to go into an office? Do you know?
You can do it actually a phone appointment. You can schedule your phone appointment. You cannot apply for ex-spousal benefits online. They need your divorce decree. They need a conversation, and hopefully you may, even if you don't know your ex's Social Security number, they can get to it with your divorce decree, your marriage certificate, and find them.
Yeah, and hopefully somewhere in your discovery paperwork or in your interlocutories, I can never say that word. Those things, those questions you have to answer. Hopefully somewhere there's at least, or on your old tax returns or something, there's the Social Security information. This has been fantastic, Marcia. Thank you so much for this. I do want to ask you, because I'm sure that people have a lot of questions, a lot more information, or maybe want to do a consultation with you. What is the best way for people to reach you?
The best way is through my website, mantellretirementconsulting.com. There's a contact form on there. So you can shoot me an email through that contact, or you can Google Marcia Mantell and you'll find me, or send an email, Marcia Mantell at mantellretirement.com.
Great. And I will make sure all of that information is in the show notes. So if you're driving or walking or taking care of the kids, don't worry about trying to write it down. It'll be in the show notes. Marcia, thank you so much for sharing this. I think this is a perfect kickoff for 2026 to really help people who are thinking about this, regardless of whether you're married, divorced, single, an ex, or concerned about retirement, to really have a clearer understanding of Social Security and then be able to take the right action. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and wisdom.
You're very welcome, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to everybody listening in. And thank you for your attention to this very important matter. And don't forget to tune in to the next episode of The D Shift. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.